She sat at the same table, every Sunday, third row from the back, by the side door, under the stained glass window that hadn't lit up in years, never moved forward, never joined coffee hour. She came when the hymns began, and left just before the final benediction. Her name was Clara Mae Hightower, 84, widowed, always wore a navy shawl even in July. To most she was just a quiet presence, an old lady holding a worn hymnal. But that morning, Scout turned his head toward her, then sat and didn't look away. Elijah followed his gaze. Something in him shifted, because dogs don't stare without reason. Not Scout. Not after all they'd seen together. He watched Clara fold her bulletin, place it neatly beside her purse, and glance toward the front pews. But only for a moment, as if remembering a place she'd once been asked not to return to. Thank you for being here. Sometimes the smallest moments carry the greatest meaning. Today's story is one of those, quiet, powerful, and worth remembering. If it touches your heart, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like more stories like this, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one. Now let's take a closer look at what really happened. The church was small, white clapboard siding, a steeple that leaned ever so slightly in the wind. 6 wooden pews on each side. No choir loft, just Mrs. Whitley and her tired organ. Most Sundays followed the same rhythm. Greeting, hymn 213, scripture, Pastor Harris's short sermon usually about kindness or patience, then coffee, store-bought cookies, the same jokes about Presbyterian punch. But Clara Mae Hightower didn't stay for that part. She came in quiet, never made eye contact, never shook hands during the peace be with you, always left through the side door. Before the last verse finished, most people assumed she was shy, or tired, or maybe just stuck in old ways. No one asked. Not really. They'd grown used to her being invisible, but Elijah noticed. And more importantly, Scout did. That Sunday morning, Scout had refused to sit at their usual spot. Instead, he turned his head toward the left aisle, ears tilted, eyes steady, then rose, walked slow, purposeful, toward the back row, and sat beside Clara. Just sat, didn't nudge, didn't beg. He simply existed beside her, like she was the reason they came today. Clara flinched slightly at first, then looked down. Scout didn't move, and something in her softened. She reached out slow and touched the top of his head, just once, then returned her hand to her lap, but she didn't move away. Elijah stood by the doorway, watched, didn't smile, didn't interfere, only bowed his head slightly. Because when Scout chose to sit with someone, there was always a reason. After the service, Pastor Harris approached Elijah, smiling, friendly. "We're so glad to see you again, Mr. Boone. It's always a blessing when you drop in." Elijah nodded. "Who's the woman in the blue shawl?" The pastor hesitated, glanced toward the side door where Clara had already slipped out. "Oh, that's Clara Mae Hightower. She's been coming here for years. Quiet soul." Pause. "She lost her husband in '82, I believe. Came back after the funeral. But she hasn't sat up front since." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" The pastor shrugged. "Hard to say. She never caused trouble. Just prefers the back, I suppose." But Elijah knew better. No one sits near the exit for no reason. Not for 40 years, not like that. That afternoon he asked around. The town was small. Names stuck. Stories didn't always die, they just grew quiet. At the diner, an older man said, "Clara, sweet woman, always alone." At the pharmacy, the clerk whispered, "She used to lead the church sewing circle, you know." Until, well, it just kind of stopped. At the post office, someone said, "There was some sort of disagreement back in the '80s. I think it had to do with her daughter." That night, Elijah sat on the porch, Scout at his feet, notebook in hand. He wrote a single line. "She doesn't sit in the back because she's old. She sits there because someone once made her feel like she wasn't welcome up front." He looked at Scout. Who turns away a woman like that? But Scout didn't answer. He just rested his head on Elijah's boot, as if to say, the same kind of people who forget what a pew is for. The next Sunday, Elijah came early, before the choir warmed up, before the lights were turned on. Scout followed, no leash, no hesitation. They sat in the back row, where Clara usually sat, but today, her seat was empty. Elijah looked down. Something was tucked under the pew, a folded church bulletin from 1983. He opened it. Inside, a handwritten note on the back of the announcements. Neat script, deliberate, painfully restrained. Please stop punishing my mother. I made the mistake, not her. I won't come back. But let her sit where her heart used to be. Angela, her daughter, the one no one talked about. Scout whined, then turned, walked down the center aisle, and sat beside a pew near the front, third row, right side. Exactly where Clara would have sat. 40 years ago, before it happened, that was the place where Angela had once stood. During a Christmas recital, barely 19, her stomach just starting to show. And where afterward? No one asked her to sing again. Clara had tried to come back, tried to sit up front like before, but the glances came, the slow silences, the polite cold, so she moved back, one row, then another, until the only space left was the one closest to the exit. Elijah stood in that third pew, looked out at the empty sanctuary, and for the first time in years, he felt shame for a place he hadn't built, but had once believed in blindly. He spoke to Pastor Harris that afternoon, told him about the note, the bulletin, the truth. The pastor sat quiet for a long time, then said, "I don't think I ever knew, or maybe I didn't want to." Elijah said nothing. Sometimes silence was the more honest answer. That Wednesday, Elijah met with the church elders. Scout waited patiently outside the room. Elijah laid the note on the table, then said just one sentence. She never left the church, but the church left her. An older man, Mr. Blanchard, folded his hands. "We didn't ask her to leave." "No," Elijah said, "but you also never asked her to return." Another elder, Mrs. Reeves, looked away. "I remember Angela. She was bright, sang like a bird." Then softly, "She disappeared so fast, I never knew why." Elijah nodded. She didn't disappear, she was erased, but Clara stayed, because she still believed even if no one believed in her. There was no anger in Elijah's voice, just gravity, the kind of weight that pulls truth up from the floor and sets it gently on the table, where everyone has to look at it. Scout paced outside the door, as if he too was waiting for the past to open itself. By Sunday, something had shifted. People noticed Clara wasn't there again, but her name had returned. On the church bulletin, "Prayer for Clara Mae Hightower, for strength and for the courage we owe her." That night Elijah sat outside her porch. Scout curled beneath the rocker. He didn't bring the note, didn't bring flowers, just himself, and a single line. "They read your daughter's name today." Clara didn't cry, didn't speak, but she brought out 2 glasses of sweet tea, sat beside him, and whispered, "I thought no one remembered." Elijah looked at her, soft, steady. "Some of us are just slower to arrive." That Sunday, Clara came earlier than usual, not by much, just 5 minutes, but enough that the sanctuary was still quiet, enough that no one was there to stare. When she paused in the doorway, she stood longer than she meant to, still wore her navy shawl, still held the same worn hymnal. But this time, she didn't go to her seat. She looked at the third pew, the one near the front, her old place, the one she hadn't touched since 1983. Scout noticed her first. He was already inside, lying beside Elijah. He stood, walked slowly to her, didn't bark, didn't nudge, just sat beside her. Like before, Elijah didn't move, didn't speak. He watched from halfway back, letting time do what words could not. Clara took one step, then stopped. Her hand gripped the side of the pew. She traced the wood grain with her fingers, the way one might brush an old scar on a wrist. Behind her the sanctuary filled in slowly. Whispers, shuffling feet, bulletins rustling. People glanced, not in judgment this time, but in quiet realization. They hadn't seen her stand there in decades. Most had never seen her that far from the exit at all. Then came the child, 6, maybe 7. Name tag read, Eva. She skipped down the aisle, spotted Clara, and stopped, looked up, smiled. Then, with the certainty only children carry, she reached up and held Clara's hand. "Do you want to sit next to me?" The church froze. Elijah held his breath. Scout tilted his head. And Clara. She let go of the pew, of the weight, of the decades, and nodded. They walked together, the girl first, Clara beside her, step by step, until they reached the third pew. Clara sat slow, closed her eyes, and for the first time in 42 years, she was not the last to arrive. She was not sitting near the door. She was not invisible. Pastor Harris began the service, voice steadier than usual, eyes wet. "Today we remember the strength of return and the grace of invitation." After the benediction, Clara didn't rush to leave. She stayed, shook hands, laughed softly at something Mrs. Reeves said when asked if she'd come to coffee hour. She hesitated, then said, "I think I will, just for a little while." Elijah stepped outside, let the door close behind him. He didn't need to stay. Some returns weren't meant to be witnessed, just made possible. Scout waited by the bench outside, looking through the window, watching Clara pour coffee into a paper cup. As others made room for her at their table, no one said, "We're sorry." No one needed to, because the pew remembered, the wood remembered, the light remembered. And now, so did everyone else. The next week Clara arrived even earlier. This time she wasn't alone. Eva was waiting on the steps, holding a folded drawing, crayon hearts, one pew, two people. She handed it to Clara and said, "This is your spot now." But inside the sanctuary something had changed. It wasn't louder or more crowded, but it felt fuller, as if something missing had quietly returned to its rightful place. Clara sat in the third pew again. No hesitation, no whispers, only space and sunlight cutting through the stained glass in a way it hadn't in years. After service, she didn't leave through the side door, didn't fold her bulletin quietly and slip away unnoticed. She stayed, poured coffee, asked someone about their grandson's surgery. Someone else asked for one of her old recipes. The sound was small, but it was real. And before she left, Clara did one more thing. She walked to the back row, to the place she'd sat for decades, folded a handkerchief navy blue with white stitching, and placed it neatly on the old pew, then smoothed it once with her palm, not to mark where she had been forgotten, but to honor where she had waited. Elijah saw it later, didn't touch it, only bowed his head, as Scout sat beside the pew, like standing guard over an old story, finally allowed to rest. No one asked who placed the cloth there, they just let it be, like a silent psalm. Only the pews could sing. Elijah and Scout left quietly that morning, didn't stop for coffee, didn't say goodbye. Some closures don't need punctuation, just a pause, and a turning of the page. As they walked away from the little white church, Scout looked back once, then forward and kept walking. Some people don't leave churches. They wait for the church to return to them. They sit quietly, in the corners we forget to look at, near the exits, behind the noise between the verses, not because they've given up, but because someone once asked them to step aside, and they were too gracious to say no. If this story touched you, share a name in the comments, someone you once saw near the exit, someone who never asked for attention, but deserved a seat closer to the light. And if you believe in small returns, in silent strength, and in pews that remember, you're already part of this story. Scout and Elijah will be back, probably sooner than you think.